morning, my friends. Well, today is a very busy day for us on the farm. Today we are processing our first meat birds of 2025. But before we go out there and start processing, I wanted to kind of run you through some of the processes that I go through mentally and prepare for butchering day. So I have these plastic bins. They're all sterilized. I have 4 of them. I keep 2 outside with me when I'm processing to separate out tenders, legs, thighs, and breasts from the bones. The bones come in and they go onto these 2 different stock pots right here on the stove where when we're done processing, all I have to do is turn on the stove and we have bone broth. So going, because tomorrow I can bone broth, and what it does is it frees up space in my freezer so that I don't have to store bones. So it's very helpful, and it starts that whole process of stocking the root cellar. So I have in the sink typically some hot soapy water in case I need to wipe something up. This is just in the house. Over here on my messy table, it's not cleaned yet. I've sharpened all my knives and they're actually out on the table, which will go out to our processing station in just a minute. Some equipment that I have that I always haven't had, but this is our 4th year processing meat birds. We do 90, so we're pretty excited about our ability to do that. We only do 90 because we get 3 batches of 30. Edward and I can process 30 ourselves in a relative normal amount of time during the day instead of taking up an entire day of processing and then an entire day of canning. It gives me about 3/4 of a day of processing. Well, maybe a little less than that, more like a little over a half anyway, of processing and packaging, and then it doesn't just kill me for a week. But some of the equipment I have is I have an industrial size vacuum sealer. This allows me to part out my chicken breasts, tenders, legs, and thighs, and I package it for the freezer, sucking out all the air so that it has a really nice seal to it. And then I have a scale. I got a new scale, but I have a smaller one. So this stuff is not, everybody does it their own way, right, my friends? And you'll figure out if you're going to process your own chickens the way that you want to do it for yourself. But anyway, I thought we would go outside and kind of see the setup out there. Again, I've sharpened my knives. We have knives for parting out the birds and viscerating, and then Edward has knives for actually calling the birds. So there are 2 different knives that kinds of knives that we use, and they're very sharp. So we usually do it on concrete because the concrete allows us to pour some disinfectant stuff on it, and it allows us to clean it really well. So that's why we do it, and we do it under the awning in case it's rained. Yes, it has rained before while we've been processing. Let's start here though. The meat birds are going to come right here. They're in their chicken tractor around the corner this way. They're going to come right here for Edward to easily go in there and grab them. And these are our cones. We have 4 killing cones for chickens. On the other side we have one for turkeys. So basically the chicken goes in here head down and the cone just hugs it, right, and relaxes it. And then we bind the feet by bungees, which I'll show you in a minute, and we let them hang there so that they relax and de-stress and all the blood runs to their heads. And then Edward calls them, and we have what we call our blood buckets where the blood just drains in there. From there, and then they sit for a while. From there they go over to the scalder, which is plenty hot, which we got to turn down. We put a little soap in there because soap helps clean the feathers and disengage them from the bird. It takes about 1:50 max. And then they come over here to the plucker where we typically have a sled here, and all the feathers come out. Now, you don't have to have a plucker. You can pluck it yourself. I recommend that you don't. And the reason why I recommend that you don't is because it's very time consuming. A plucker depulks a bird in less than a minute. Doing it by hand takes about 10 minutes. So you have 10 minutes where you've scalded the bird and you're plucking it and you haven't even viscerated it yet or parted it out. You don't have to do it this way. You can do it any way you want. But my recommendation is some of this equipment is worth the investment. I obviously felt like the equipment I have is all worth the investment, but each to their own, right? So when Edward's done running it through the plucker, he puts it on the table, which I need to disinfect. And the table is where I part out all of the birds. I viscerate and divide it up, and then the birds' parts go in the house where we first started out. So that is our typical setup. Now we start setting up the day before butchering day, and the setup that we do is making sure that we have all of our knives, making sure all the knives are sharpened, making sure we have things like Band-Aids, rubber gloves, thermometer, soap, lighter, all the knives sharpened, our bungees, Sharpies. So we make sure that we have all those supplies. We make sure that we have propane for the scalder and that we have all of our equipment out and ready to go. So we do a lot of prep prior to processing day, and that saves us a considerable amount of time. Anyway, so I thought we would run through the first couple birds that we processed today, and I'd bring you guys along to show you how I do it and how Edward does it, and then you guys will know how we process our birds. So anyway, stick around with us as we show you how we harvest our own meat on the farm. See you in a minute. All right, the meat birds are there and brought up. So I talked to you guys about bungees. Here's some bungees, and they hook up right here. So I go ahead and lay some bungees on each of these. These are all behind the killing cones. And the reason why we do this is when the birds are put up here upside down, we bungee their legs, and it keeps them from falling out during the process of calling them. So the fresh bungees are on there. The sled is being brought up. I'm going to disinfect the table, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So what's happening here is Edward is getting the chickens in the cones. He has a special finger thing that calms the chickens down. I don't know why. The minute he stops, they do that. But when he does this finger thing, they relax. Anyway, he puts them in the cone, and then we're going to go ahead and get his feet strapped down. Over. Now this is painless for the chickens. So pull that bungee tight. And I wrap it around several times because all chickens are different sizes, and it's just important that we get a tight hold on it. So that'll hold them in there nice and tight. So this is how that looks. This one didn't go around like that. This one was, the legs were thicker, so I couldn't get it around again. Like I said, the chickens don't experience any pain during this process. The chickens are all in their cones, and they're just gonna rest there and relax and get comfortable. They'll rest for a few minutes, and then Edward will go ahead and call them. So when that happens, they'll go ahead and drain for a bit, and then they will go into the scalder. Now, basically, the scalder is between 140, 150. Around that, you scald between, 30 seconds and 2 minutes. We found that our sweet spot is about a minute, 20 seconds. Around that, we try to keep it between the 140, 150. Sometimes it goes over, and sometimes it goes under. You'll know by how the plucker is doing whether or not we needed to scald longer. We do not keep the legs or any of the insides. We don't use it. And I don't have the energy to store it or to find somebody else that's going to use it. So I guess if people want to come help us process and then they want to part out and take the things that they want, they can take the things that they want. But I don't keep the legs or the insides. I part out my chicken, and 90% of the, well, more than 90%, I think we're at the very last batch that we do, not today, but the last batch that we do this year. I'll probably keep, 2 or 3 whole chickens, but the rest of them will be parted out and divided up into pieces of meat. All right, they've been called and they're relaxing now. And so as they relax and drain, Edward will pull them and start scalding the chicken. We put a little dish soap in the water, like I talked to you guys earlier. It helps break down the soil on the chicken and loosen up the follicles of the feathers and helps the plucking process.
And it breaks down the oil in the feathers.
Yeah, it breaks down the oil on the feathers.
To help with the plucking process.
Yeah. Then we're good.
Good.
Yep.
Put it in there.
Let me turn it on.
In there, but deep are.
Yeah, the water is still warm in the hose. Is that good?
Yeah, as good as it's gonna get with the warm water.
All right, that's fine.
It has to be cold to shock.
It'll be cold. All right, so we're good there. It's the first one, so we got some adjustments to make. And then the chicken comes over to this table here where I eviscerate, and I will show you how I do that. So there's just a little feathers on this one still. That's okay. I'd rather have some than have it over scalded.
Do you have a lighter?
Alright, so behind me on the steps, behind me, which you can't see, I have a tub where I keep things. So I just go here, and it's really easy just to take off a few of the feathers. Now when you're processing, you're your own quality control, right? So you determine the cleanliness of the product of the food that you're going to feed your family and or sell, whatever you're going to do. We don't sell, but we give excess. So we process more than we need for our family of 3. And what we don't use, we give away. And when people come and help us process, we also give away. And they learn how to do it for themselves. So we're adding value. That's one of our goals in life, is to add value to people's lives. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these little teeny bit of feathers off. And then what I do is I come along, and these are my little knives, and I go ahead and take the head off. right? The legs, you split it right where the joint is, and they come right off. Bend up the leg, there's a joint there. And of course your knives need to be sharp. It just helps you out so much better. I haven't done this since last year, so I always do that. And then I flip over my bird, and there's an oil gland back here. So if you're gonna do a whole bird, you need to take that oil gland off. It'll make your meat taste bad. So take the oil gland off. But because I part out my chickens, I don't do that, because I just cut the tail off completely. But if you're gonna do a whole bird, and you're selling, especially if you're selling, you want to make sure that you keep that. So then you pull the skin up, okay? And if you're doing whole birds again or selling, you want to keep as much skin and fat as possible, right? But I part out. You tear up the skin. So we got a little overscald. You can see it there. It's kind of a little bit white. So anyway, all right. So there's 2 tubes here. So I got my fingers around both of them. One is the esophagus. The other one is the larynx, where they do their chattiness. You pull that up off the neck, okay? And then right here is the craw. It's attached to the inside of the skin. You're gonna pull that away from the breast and the skin, so now it's detached, okay? And the reason why you do this is because when we pull everything out, you want to be able to pull this out with it, okay? Alright. So then you're gonna cut just above the vent. That's the vent right there. And you're just gonna slice in and pull it up like that. Pull it up. Okay. Then you take your hand. I mean, look at this. So, take your hand and you're just scooping around the rib cage, and you're just loosening up all the insides. So this is the only one I'm going to talk you through, and then I will just process a couple, and then you can watch. Anyway, you just scoop it out, okay? And you can get your fingers through, and you can pull the esophagus through and the vocal cords. If you can't, that's okay. You just make sure you take your hands, and you're loosening stuff, right? So that's a lung. It's out of one rib cage. You're going to loosen the other one. There it goes. All right. And then we just pull out. And here's the vocal, esophagus, the grit, and the innards, right? Now, all right, so then we get to where you don't want this inside of your bird, right? So you just cut out. Because I part out my chicken, I'm not saving the tail, so I just come and I cut down, and I really make sure that I don't contaminate my bird with that. So then I just cut it off all in general. I move this out of the way. I take the debris, I put it in its container, and then I rinse my table off. So this process is a rinsing and cleaning and keeping everything clean, right? All right. All right, then I flip it over. Snap the neck. The neck I do save for the bone broth. And remember, you're always trying to cut in between the vertebrae so that you don't dull your knives too quick. It's okay if you do, just try not to. Again, pull all your extra little hairs off. So I have 2 buckets of bins over here, which I'll have to add ice in a minute for it. All right, so now we're gonna part out this chicken. I want to make sure you guys can see without touching the camera.
This one. You're getting dialed in here.
All right. So basically, I want the legs, tenders, and thighs. So I just do this. I'm not worried about skin unless it's on the legs, tenders, and thighs, right? I'm gonna go ahead and pull the skin off of the breast parts because I don't utilize it for that. It's not necessary. Well, it's not what we want, right? So talking through this slows my process down, but it also allows you guys to see how I do it. So this is the breast bone. I just cut along the side, and I very gently along the side here. So you see how there's a natural part. This is the tender, this is the breast. So the tender tucks inside of the breast, always. So we're just gonna go ahead and cut along. Might have Edward go get a bag of ice for me. So that's a tender, which then I go ahead and cut down. There's your tender. This is what your chicken tenders are made out of that you get, or chicken nuggets or whatever. And then here's the breast. All right, and then we'll go ahead and do the other side along the breastbone. Try and keep the knife as close to that as possible. Okay. All right, and we go ahead and remove the tender again. Breast. Now we have the rest of the chicken, right? I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can snap it like this. Because I don't need to have to try and maneuver all this. This is bone for bone broth. This is my thigh and leg. I leave the skin on. Thigh and leg. Leave the skin on. Bone broth. And that's how it's separated out. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start processing a little bit faster. Hi, my friends. So we're done processing the chickens. I have to wash my glasses, but anyway, that being said, we're done processing the chickens. It took my husband and I 4 hours to process 25 birds, which is pretty good for us. I think we had 30, we lost 5, right? And that happens sometimes from getting baby chicks, they die, sometimes they don't. This year was a little bit harder. We lost several birds this year so far. So, you know, sometimes there's good chicken years, sometimes there isn't. What we're doing now is that we've processed everything and we parted out like you just saw. Now I'm going to be vacuum sealing. Now I didn't record what I do with the bones. I put the bones in and I make bone broth. You can watch another one of my videos on how I make bone broth. Basically, I just take the bones, put them in there, fill up a stock pot with bones, add a couple whole onions, a couple full bulbs of garlic, some ginger, some black pepper, and some Celtic sea salt, and apple cider vinegar, and I let it cook for, you know, 24 hours on low, you know, or I get it up to a boil and then I turn it down to low. Anyway, and the apple cider vinegar extracts all of that nutrients from the bone marrow and puts that into your broth. The broth is phenomenal tasting. So, and I go through a lot of it. So bone broth is definitely a big part of the preserving of the food. But what we're gonna do now is actually vacuum seal. I'm gonna show you just how I do it. I have a tub right here of breast, tenders, legs, and thighs. And all the bones are in the stock pot and or in the freezer. So what I'm gonna do is put out pieces, dry them off with paper towel, and I've already sealed up some of these bags, and we're gonna start vacuum sealing them. I think I'm tired. Kind of wrap up everything. I wanted to show you guys what 25 meat birds looks like, parted out, packaged, mostly frozen. Some are not quite there yet, and canned. So we have breasts, legs and thighs, and tenders. And then I did some canning. I have 9 jars of bone broth. I have, see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 jars of chicken noodle soup and 9 jars of chicken, lemon dill chicken and rice soup. Okay, and I still have 9 full chicken carcasses to do, or bones to do the more bone broth. So I could have made another, you know, I don't know. I could have filled up this space right here on the island with bone broth and the rest of it over there. But I just wanted to give you guys a look at that. Isn't that impressive? That's just 25 meat birds, you guys. And really, I mean, you can really, my kitchen is a mess, so I apologize, but you can really put some food away for, in a relatively short amount of time, and feed your family all organic, pasture raised chicken. All right, so this took Edward and I 4 hours to process, from the first birds going into the cones to the last birds coming into the house. It took us another hour and a half to put everything in freezer bags and clean up and disinfect. Okay, so it is a chunk of time, right? And then I spent all day the next day canning. I have one canner, fits 7 quart jars in it. Obviously I need 2 canners, but I need a bigger stove and I need a kitchen remodel. So we work with what we have. So it takes me a long time to do the canning part. But that being said, this is going to feed our family for quite some time, and it's going to allow us to be generous in a capacity that is blesses other families and is within our ability to be generous, right? So I love to be generous, but I don't have millions of dollars to give away to people, but I can give food away. So and I can bless people and try at least. So that being said, I wanted you guys to see this because we do 90 birds a year. This year we've lost a few birds, so we won't quite make 90, but we'll probably make somewhere around 85. Not even that, probably more like 80. Let's just say 80. But this is 25 birds here, plus I have at least 9 more quart jars full of bone broth that I haven't even processed yet. And that's really going to look good in my root cellar, which in the coming weeks we'll do a root cellar, what's going on in the root cellar video. But I just wanted you guys to watch this and to see what we have done and been able to accomplish, and hopefully this inspires some of you to start raising your own meat birds and putting food in your own freezer and removing yourselves from having to rely so heavily on grocery stores and being able to feed your family a quality of food that you otherwise cannot get at a traditional grocery store and can be very expensive. So anyway, please like and subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support us, and have a great day. Bye.